Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. The new regime of now I've got the heater on, or on the thermostat, but the heater is in here, and leaving the door virtually closed overnight meant that when I got up this morning the house was nice and warm, which was very pleasant. And now I've opened the door to come out here, it's freezing. Under normal circumstances, a hell of a lot of the heat from the house would have come out here by now, but it hasn't. So it's currently 13 degrees. I'm still in my dressing gown and my little legs are freezing. Never mind, I wanted to get this one out of the way because I'm out today. So right, winter watering. I'll put the links to the, I'm mainly talking about the Dendrobiums, but I'll have a go at everything basically. First off, I've got to draw a line. I've just said about the temperatures, yeah? This grow room is potentially separated from the house, so it works more like a greenhouse under my winter conditions when the door stays shut overnight, yeah? So I do get a hell of a drop in temperature overnight, and that affects the way the plants use the water, especially in the pots. Yeah, because with the cooler temperatures they won't be growing as fast, they won't be using up that water as quickly. Yeah, so it's quite important to not start pouring water into pots that are still wet in low temperatures. That turns to soggy, and like I've always said, we don't want soggy bottoms, especially with low temperatures. It's just a recipe for trouble, quite honestly. But I will say that if you're not growing in an environment like this and you are growing in a normal home, this probably isn't going to happen. So you probably won't see a change in your watering patterns. Now you probably are going to be subject to shorter days, which will slow things down. They won't be growing as fast, but you're not going to get the temperature drops. And if you're not getting the temperature drops, you might not need to adjust your watering as much as, for instance, I do out here. So, you know, it's all a balancing act. I mean, I've now got the grow lights extending my day lengths, which should stop the plants slowing down as much as they have in previous winters. But I'm still going to be subject to the lower temperatures, which will slow them down, but not as much because of the lights. So you just got to watch what happens in your environment as you change from autumn to winter. And if you haven't got artificial lights in the home, then you're going to be subject to quite short days and your plants are going to slow up. So they won't use as much water. And if they slow right down and they're not growing much, what else won't they need? Feed. There's no point in pouring fertiliser into pots if the plants can't use it. That's also a potential recipe for trouble. So that's pots out the way and the different environments. And nobody can tell you how frequently to water your orchids in your environment. You've just got to work it out for yourself. And just remember that in cooler temperatures, err on the caution of drier rather than wetter. That's the only generalised advice I can give. I mean, quite a lot of my Oncidium types are not supposed to get dry. You know, they're supposed to stay constantly moist. But that expression is used for growing orchids, orchids in active growth. So if your plants are slowing right down, the statement goes out the window, quite honestly, and you're better off letting your plants get almost dry before you start pouring water in them. And yeah, you've just got to work it out basically. And it's just looking at the plants. Feel the weight of the pot. Look at the plant. Is it growing? Are there new growths coming? If so, it's probably going to need perhaps a bit more water than an Oncidium that's finished blooming and hasn't started any new growths yet. It's doing nothing at that point. So all you've got to do is keep it alive until it decides to put a spurt on and put out some new growths and potentially some new roots. So you just got to watch your plants. And quite honestly, it's a lot more important in the winter with the shorter days, and if you get lower temperatures, watering becomes far more critical. Quite honestly, in the warmer weather, when the nights are warm, daytimes are very warm, day lengths are long, you could probably stand them in a bucket and they'd still grow. I wouldn't recommend that in the winter though. Right, back to the Dendrobiums. Winter rest. I'll put the links to the two videos because it's split into part 1 and part 2 on the decision making process of those I'm going to give a full winter rest and those that will just get reduced water because they're not growing so much, if at all. Yeah, so there is a difference. And now is the time when I start changing my watering patterns, which is more the subject. Now at the moment the mounts are getting watered every 2 or 3 days, depending on whether that sun shines out or not. If the sun shines out during the day and it hits that glass, it warms up in here. Yeah, therefore the plants would use more of the moisture around their roots. Humidity stays high, that doesn't change. I mean, it's currently 64%, but at 14 degrees, that's plenty high enough. 64% at 25 degrees C might be deemed a little low for some plants. Certainly some of these buried down in there. Crikey, that Dracula's dried out again. That is drying so fast lately. Right, back to the mounts. There are many other orchids that are not Dendrobiums in here. Things like my Tolumnias, for instance. They're going to carry on growing through the winter, especially now they've got some lights. And they're growing. There are new growths pushing out and new root systems being formed. They need some food. But then the full resting type Dendrobiums have already had their last feed. They're not getting any more. Yeah? So I've now got to split everything into 2. And it's just simply got to be done. The mounts that are not resting won't get watered as frequently, but they still need some food. So what I'm going to do now is the fully resting types are going to miss a run, starting literally now. So I've actually got to water them today. So the resting types will get, fully resting types will get watered today as a flush, and everything else is going to get a flush today as well because they got fed last time round, and there's no point in feeding every time at this time of year. They won't use that amount of feed. They're not growing fast enough, so they're all going to get a flush today, and then in 2 or 3 days time, depending on whether that sun comes out and raises the daytime temperatures, that's the decision. Have they had a couple of sunny days? Well, every 2 days then. Have they had some dull days with very little heat? 3 days. But when I come to the next round, basically it will be a feed, and I'll only water those that are not resting. The resting type will just get missed. So they could be now going 6 days before they see any more water, and they certainly won't be seeing any more feed. I've been reducing the levels of feed progressively through October. You know, I've come down from my summer levels of sort of 150 parts per million, sometimes a bit higher than that. You know, heading down towards the sort of 100 parts per million and sometimes even lower, just 80 parts per million. They had a CalMag feed not too long ago. That was at 80 parts per million. That'll be probably the last one they get now. They're not putting out stonking new growth. There's no need for extra through the winter, or I don't believe there is. There's plenty of calcium and magnesium in my fertilizer for a general purpose feed. You know, if you're thinking you've got excessively vigorous plants, then yes, you might need extra, but I'm okay with what I've got. So that's the routine, at least through November now, is every other watering, the fully resting types will get missed out, which means the run that they miss out will be a feed run. And then when I come round to do what will, you know, like day one, everything gets a flush. Yeah? The next time I water will be a feeding run, the resting types get missed out. The following run will be a flush, and they'll come round again. So that'll be within 5 or 6 days. Yeah? And then that'll carry on probably through most of November. And then once we get into the real depths of winter, this shade netting will be off. The winter resting types will be right up against that glass. They'll be in full sun when we get some. So they'll be fine. And the others will have the lights on them. So it'll be a bit of a mixture this winter, a little bit different. But that's an effective way of reducing your watering and feeding, is just miss out a run. And by missing out the run that is the feeding run for the non-resting types, I haven't really got to do much thinking. Unfortunately, there's still one plant that's a nuisance, and that's the giant bush up against the glass. Oh, that's straight into the sun. Sorry! Everybody running for cover. But that one right up against the glass there isn't going to get rested because it's got so much new growth on it, which means all the actual fully resting types, which is most of the rest that are up there, are going to have to be got down to get at that one. So I might actually move that to make life easier. Otherwise I've got to take down 6 or 7 plants just to get at one. So I'll see what I do about that. That's just mechanics rather than actual watering. So that's going to be the routine at least through November, is extend the period between the watering because they're not going to be growing as fast, and those that are needing the full winter rest will miss a run out, and the run they miss out will be the low feed run for the others that are not resting. That seems a reasonable way of doing it. But as I said, when things slow down, even if it's only things are going to slow down less in here this year than they ever had before, simply because of the lights, by extending the day length. So it should keep them growing a bit better. So they are still going to need some feed, but they're not going to need lots because the temperature's lower. So that's what I'm going to be up to today. I was just going to have a look round and yeah, see, these mounts were watered 2 days ago and the moss is dry, bone dry, crispy dry. Yeah, so that's in 2 days, and quite honestly that's 2 days without much heat in here because it's been so cold outside. And the next thing to do is block these up. They're letting a lot of cold air in at night, and the chances of them coming on at the temperature I've got that set to during the day is virtually zero now. So I'm just wasting heat going out through those vents. So those can be bubble wrapped now for the winter and shut down. And I'll fire them up again next year. So that's less electricity being used. Not much really. They hardly ever come on now. They're just not needed. It doesn't get as warm. Even when the sun's coming through the glass, it's still not generating anywhere near as much heat because it's so much weaker. And the shade netting's off this end, so I've got nice good bright light there all the time now. And this is the shadow I was on about. Yeah, as the sun comes round, that shadow starts to drop because it's still getting higher in the sky. But eventually it will be so low in the sky that that shadow only goes down to about there, not right down near the ground. And once it gets to about there and doesn't drop any lower, then that shade netting can come off. I'm just trying to protect these down here, Masdevallias, Restrepias, Draculas and things. I don't want them really getting direct sun through the glass. There's too much for them. And the fence next door does the job for me, so it saves me moving plants around. But I'm not quite there yet, probably another week, maybe 2 weeks. And then we can think about taking this shade netting off as well. And the other thing I've had to do is, because the heater's now coming on at night, it's drying the air. And the old fogger kept coming on. I was watching it yesterday evening, so I actually shut it off. Because what I don't want is cool temperatures and high humidity. It's just not a good combination. You know, it can lead to some rotting and some of that black sooty mould on some of the leaves. So basically during the night the humidity only drops down to about 55–60%, even with the heater turning on and off, and that's plenty high enough at 12 degrees, more than high enough. So I'm turning this off at night now and then just pop it back on during the day. And it's already registered. I need to lower the humidistat now because I've got 63% humidity in here. That shouldn't be coming on. So I'll adjust the hydrostat, take it down a bit. In fact, I can probably... Oh, that's what's wrong. The actual reading on that meter, which is far from accurate, is way off. Yeah. I'll let it run for a bit. Anyway, I've got to crack on with the watering, and yeah, so that's going to be the routine for the mounts from now on. And then during December and January, the gap between the watering is liable to get longer, because there won't be the heat in here. Even with the shade netting off and the sun out, it's still not going to generate a lot of heat. So with those cooler temperatures, you know, there will be some slowing down. So I'll maybe move from sometimes 2 days and sometimes 3 days to definitely 3 days and occasionally 4. So the gap in between watering will get bigger. That's all I'll change. The idea of you know, the resting Dendrobiums missing a run, once they get out into December, they'll miss 2 runs, which might bring them back to getting watered on a feeding run, which I'll have to take care, because obviously I don't want them getting any food. So that'll take a little bit of playing around, but not for another sort of 5 or 6 weeks, something like that. I should be okay till then. And yeah, it is a time of change. As you go into autumn and head into winter, it's a time of change. Now, in a home environment, that change might not be anywhere near as dramatic as it would be in some sort of grow room or greenhouse. It's not going to be anywhere near as dramatic. And if it's not as dramatic, any changes you make don't need to be dramatic. They may not even need much changing at all. But don't get soggy plants in low temperatures. It's just a recipe for things going wrong. Yeah, so just watch it as you go into your autumn and winter, and appreciate what's going on around your plants. You know, your temperature changes, your minimum night temperature, your maximum day. I mean, a lot of people will have put their heating on. That dries the air out, yeah, and it might even be getting quite warm compared with what your plants have been used to. So keep your eye on your environment where your orchids are. And another tip, with one person in mind, if you're going to move a shelf that's not on wheels, it pays to take the plants off first. Otherwise you dump the lot on the floor. I mean, these plants have got little rubber feet on them, and rubber on concrete's going to stick. So the only way I could move a shelf like that would be to drag it at the base, not attempt to move it any other way. Yeah? And even with wheels, if it hits a bump, you can jar your pots. So quite honestly, if you're going to move shelving units around, it pays to get the... I know it's a pain, but it really does pay to get your plants off first and move the shelf when it's empty, and then put your plants back on. Otherwise you dump them all on the floor. And although I'm giggling, it's just the thought of it, you know, and the mess that's going to generate. And if you've got clay pots, some of those might even break, and then you've got to go and find another one. And a lot of plants will fall out of the pots, and then you've got to repot them. It's a big deal to dump a set of plants on the floor because your shelf's overbalanced or something like that. So if you're going to move your plants around on shelves, sort your shelves out and get them empty first, and then just put your plants back. And as you do it, you'll probably shuffle them around and think, oh, actually that one can go at the back now. So yeah, it's a good opportunity for repositioning things, but don't reposition them all over the floor. It can be quite upsetting. I mean, I've dropped plants in the past. I've dropped pots, you know, they hit the floor and the plant bounces out, all the bark's all over the floor. And with flooring like this, that's not funny, because it gets down all through the things, and then you've got a messy floor underneath the plastic tiles. So any pot that you drop or mount that you drop, I dropped a Brassivola nodosa once and broke off all its new growths, and it never grew properly after that. It just went down. I ended up getting rid of it. So, you know, it can be quite traumatic dropping things. I dropped my little thingy-bob, little Phalaenopsis the other day. It broke 2 blooms off. Luckily it didn't break the buds that are forming. So these are going over now, they don't last long. This Tolumnia's gone as well. So yeah. So take care if you're moving your plants around. take a deep breath, make sure you've got the time, don't rush, do it carefully. Plants dumped on the floor, it doesn't do them any good at all. So anyway, see you next time. That's the adjustments I'm making from now with my watering routine. As I say, the decision as to which are going to get fully rested in the Dendrobium line and which aren't, that's already been done. So it's just a matter of dealing with it now. And the only change in here from last year, minimum temperature is going to be the same with the heater and the fan to move the, blast that heat around and stop getting hot spots. That doesn't change. The only difference is the lights. And that's going to be a benefit. It's got to be a benefit. Even for some of the resting type Dendrobiums, they would get good bright light mainly in the winter, but they wouldn't get the short days. So by removing that element, hopefully we should get even better blooms. Although I did have a good blooming season this late winter spring just gone. It was its best ever. So let's see if we can improve on that. See you next time. Bye for now.